Hello everyone, this is Jesús Benito, Professor of American Studies at Universidad de Valladolid. The modern, globalized and mobile world has very significantly increased the potential encounter between national citizens and foreign migrants, visitors and strangers. It is this unprecedented multiplication of interactions and contact zones across national borders that has given new prominence to the notion of hospitality. In this context, hospitality emerges as a complex cultural trope for the analysis of the arrival of the uninvited stranger at the gates of the nation. A stranger who remains irreducible, different, a stranger who represents both potential and threats, and who inevitably precipitates change in the host country. Some philosophical explorations of this tradition focus on the direct personal encounter with the other before any political considerations. The writings of Emmanuel Levinas, for example, address the moral imperative to be personally hospitable, to respond ethically and unconditionally to the demands of an unknown other. This moral imperative commands that we respond to the call of the other always, in all situations, regardless of the possible dangers to us and our property, our family, our well-being. This hospitable response carries with it the potential to force us out of familiar territory, allowing us to discover our true self. However, in the work of other scholars, mostly from the intervention of Jacques Derrida in the 1990s, hospitality has moved from the ethical realm to the political arena, from the home to the homeland. This understanding of hospitality, which Derrida terms conditional, is mostly represented by the limited and heavily regulated hospitality of nations towards visitors from beyond the national borders. It is no longer a welcoming tradition or an ethical virtue, as much as is a metaphor that intervenes in contemporary debates on nationalism, migration, multiculturalism, and asylum. In political hospitality, the potential gift of opening to the other fades under the impending threat of allowing the unknown into the national home. Whether as conditional or unconditional, as moral imperative or political regulation, hospitality is traditionally assumed to take place, to happen in a particular location with a particular master. It implies, above all, the sharing of a space, opening the door to the arrival of the unknown other. For true hospitality to take place, the host must be willing to open the personal space to a foreign presence. In this sense, hospitality is, before anything, a spatial practice. It involves the production of a particular kind of space, a space resulting from the crossing of borders and thresholds. In the new hospitable space, notions of inside and outside are transgressed, the borders separating them blurred. The stranger who belongs outside must be welcomed, permitted, called inside. Simultaneously, the host, as master of the inside, is displaced by the presence of an other whose true nature and intentions are unknown. The host risks being taken hostage by the guest, or becoming a guest in his own house. It is this paradoxical, this threatening nature of the arrival of the unknown that permeates the use of hospitality in the contemporary political discourse. Political hospitality tends to align with discourses of nationalism and immigration to reveal and reinforce binary views of centrality and alterity, belonging and alienation, legality and illegality, power and submission. Rather than evoking the essential instability of hosts and guests, the modern discourse of international hospitality underlines the stability and primacy of the host, as opposed to the vulnerability and displacement of the guest. The terms and language of hospitality are commonly deployed to legitimate the power of the self and disavow the rights of the visiting other. So let's center on the dilemma of hospitality. Let's discuss the question of the impossibility or the inescapable imperfection of national hospitality. How can the nation offer true hospitality? How can it open the door without putting itself at risk? Without surrendering the right to home and homeland? And what does the imperfect hospitality of nation towards migrant others look like at present? It would be Immanuel Kant in his celebrated thesis Perpetual Peace in the late 18th century who would argue for a series of laws to regulate all exchanges at the international level. Kant's Perpetual Peace addresses and responds to the increased mobility of early European modernity. This, after all, was a time when the Industrial Revolution and the development of international trade were becoming suspicious of national frontiers. In this context, Kant defined international hospitality as the right of a foreigner not to be treated with hostility when he arrives on someone else's territory. While Kant's proposals try to prevent the potentially hostile reception of the visitor, they also establish certain significant limitations on the rights of strangers. For example, visiting rights apply only for a restricted period of time, in a space administered by a state, and as part of a reciprocal agreement with other states. Therefore, hospitality is reserved for those who arrive with their papers in order. Kant's notions might resonate within modern political experiences at the international level, with vulnerable migrants and refugees moving in many directions, only to recurrently find the doors of nations closed to them. Kant's Perpetual Peace relocates the scene of hospitality from the home and the city to the national borders. It assumes the national space as the new home, with the stranger as temporary guest. The ethical space of the self gives way to the juridical and political space. Hospitality is no longer dependent on the infinite generosity of the individual host, as much as on the state's power to distribute individuals along the axis of belonging and non-belonging, inclusion and exclusion, citizens and foreigners. However, the contemporary politics of hosting, filtering, and incorporating the foreign visitor transcends the inclusion-rejection binary implicit in Kant's proposals. Rather than a clear-cut in and out dichotomy, more blurry and elusive politics are at play at the borders of the contemporary nation-state. One of the undisputed features of national sovereignty is the right of the nation to establish the rules of citizenship and therefore to categorize certain peoples as non-citizens. In The Origins of Totalitarianism, for example, Hannah Arendt claims that the development of the nation-state in the 19th century gradually displaced individual human rights and replaced them with citizenship rights, which are premised upon nationality. The nation-state would then offer full civil and political rights only to those who belong to the national community, simultaneously producing, policing, and excluding the non-citizens. The border encounter exploits this gap, the gap between the stranger and the citizen. Border dynamics are engaged in what we could call the legal production of illegality. As migrants cross national boundaries, international hospitality slides into migrant hostility. At the border, the migrants go through what Mary Pat Brady terms the abjection machine, a machine that transforms people into aliens, illegals, undocumented, and therefore into exploitable workforce. They are deprived of political life, reduced to bare life, finally included by way of their own exclusion. Rather than the international guests anticipated by Kant, they approximate the image of ghosts, the spectral underside that feeds Western economies and allows the Western order to continue its reproduction. These expendable bodies go by designations that range from illegal immigrants, economic migrants, to non-status, irregular, undocumented, sans-papiers. They are mostly constrained within a zone of indistinction between inside and outside, within the territorial boundaries of the nation, but without its socio-political borders. According to Italian philosopher Giorgio Agamben, the political experience of modern undocumented immigrants and refugees correlates with that of the homo sacer, a liminal figure in ancient Roman law whom anyone could kill without committing a murder. Agamben's image of the homo sacer illustrates the in-betweenness of modern migrants and refugees, paradoxically inhabiting a space both inside and outside the nation-state. The contemporary homo sacer is the stateless subject, the unwanted refugee, the outcast, caught in the non-places of the Western international reality. They are excluded from the political community and caught within sovereign power, positioned simultaneously under the law and abandoned by it. They are both indispensable and disposable. As a representation of bare life, people deprived of political life, characters like Okwe and Senai in Stephen Frears' thriller Dirty Pretty Things, Bilal in Philip Lioret's Welcome, and Tanya and Artyom in Pavel Pavlikovsky's Last Resort are the abandoned beings of the nation-state. They are subjects beyond the nation and upon whose bodies the machination of national sovereignty and neoliberal economy play out. As immanent outsiders, they are liminal figures. They are neither fully in nor fully out, but they play a fundamental role in the continuous redefinition of hospitable nations.